Hello, everyone. Thanks so much for tuning in. This is Mike Dolloff. I'm the Chief Revenue Officer at Inflow Communications. I have with me my esteemed colleague, Chris. Chris, say hello and introduce yourself.
Hi. Yeah, Chris Mitchell, Chief Technology Officer. I'm glad to be with you today, Mike.
Thanks, Chris. Look forward to talking a little bit more about Microsoft Teams. Been using this opportunity to really help educate a lot of folks about Microsoft Teams as a unified communications platform. Have spoken on many parts of this. Today, we're going to focus on using Teams with your existing on-prem PBX. We get this question a lot, so I want to answer some of the questions we get here. So, Chris, first off, if I'm using Teams with my existing on-prem PBX, what does that user experience look like?
Yeah. So for most companies who choose to, kind of pair Teams with their existing PBX, they do it for, usually for cost purposes. They've already invested in their on-prem PBX. So what that looks like for employees is they're going to use the Teams client for messaging and meetings. Then they'll use the PBX, either physical phones or soft phone or client for inbound and outbound calling. Gives them a little bit more flexibility because the PBX usually has better, call queuing capabilities or functionality, more advanced functionality than Teams does. The PBX provides phone numbers for your users, but it can also provide phone numbers for your Teams meetings. So by default, Teams doesn't have like a dial-in phone number, so you could use your PBX to provide phone numbers over to your Teams meetings so you don't have to buy a Microsoft calling plan. The users on the PBX still have the ability to call extensions on the Teams, inside of Teams. So if you have maybe conference room phones or you have an extension for your Teams meetings, you can call extension to extension, and your Teams users can do the same thing. They can call PBX users extension to extension as well.
Great. That's a good segue to the next question for you. I love licensing. It's my favorite topic. So tell me about what do you need for licensing here from the Microsoft side? That's probably a big question.
Yeah, and when you're using Teams for messaging and collaboration only, the licensing gets a little bit easier to understand. So you'll need an Office 365 license, any one of them, for Teams for messaging and meetings. Then they have the $8, phone system license, but you only have to license that for users or, phone extensions that, that need an extension from Teams. Good use case for that would maybe be a conference phone, or a user who wants to place and receive calls from the Teams client and isn't part of the PBX. Then you would license that $8 license, but for the bulk of your users, you should only need a 365 license, not the additional licensing.
Great. So what about the drawbacks? Obviously, this isn't going to work for everyone, but what are the limitations or drawbacks of this?
Yeah, and this is, typically where the IT department, kind of says, well, great, we're going to use two separate systems. Yep, you're going to be managing two separate systems. So from a dial plan perspective, you're going to have a Teams dial plan. You're going to have a PBX, dial plan, so it knows what extensions live on each system, how to forward calls between the two systems. You'll also be paying for licensing and maintenance on both systems. So you're going to have your 365 licensing. You're still going to have your PBX, any cost and maintenance for your PBX. The integration between Teams and your PBX can also add an additional layer of complexity. So where that usually comes into play is when you're trying to troubleshoot issues. I tried to call this user and it didn't connect, or we had call quality issues. That tie line between the two systems is going to have another troubleshooting layer that you're going to have to figure out. Lastly, in most cases, users still have to use multiple applications, and this is usually the deal breaker. A lot of customers say, well, maybe I don't want to do this because I have my Teams client for messaging and collaboration, and then I have to use another product, for my calling and everything like that. So users are still having multiple applications, and IT is having to update multiple applications on computers and troubleshoot multiple applications.
Chris, thank you so much for answering those questions that we get commonly with customers exploring the different Teams options. If you're just tuning in for the first time, we've got a link in the comments to our blog post where we talk about bringing together Mitel and Microsoft Teams, which I think is very relevant for a lot of the customers and organizations we talk to on this very topic today. Check it out in the description below. Thanks so much for tuning in. Have a great rest of your day.